To the extent that we live our lives in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, we thrive.
Welcome to the Meier Clinics podcast, and you just heard a quote from one of your hosts, Dr. Lisa Day. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meier Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us. Listeners, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. We're back with Dr. Lisa Day, and we are going to talk about navigating the 7 deadly sins. This topic is really good timing for me, but thank you, Lisa, for coming on the show.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. And I kind of chuckle when I put that out there because it sounds like a Netflix title or a crime victims, podcast. And
CSU or whatever it's called. Yeah. Crime Victims Unit. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it, Kristin, is that, we're now, 6 months into this pandemic, COVID, Black Lives Matter, political upheaval, the country is burning, it's
right.
People are exhausted. And, I find that, while many of us like to believe that we're angels and we don't have any negative qualities or character defects.
Oh, yeah. I have many. I'll just say that. And I own it.
Well, and what I'm observing is that in this exhaustion, that they're coming out, and I think that there's tremendous power. Scripture tells us that we gain strength through embracing our weaknesses or our limitations. And I think that, when we acknowledge that we all are broken individuals and we all can both, find ourselves navigating, exercising these deadly sins, or we being on the receiving end of them. But if we can, we can acknowledge that we are broken, then we're better able to work through them. And so that's why I want to look at it. And
I love it. I love it. I mean, yeah, I love it. And I just miss doing shows with you. I will say this, and listeners just will have heard this show as we're recording it, but I just did a show with Dr. Paul Meier, and we had so much fun. It's like the old shows that Paul, not that the shows that we've done recently haven't been great, but this one, even Paul said, this is our best show ever. In the 4 years we've been doing this, this is our best show ever. And it really was. And every time I do a show with you, I feel like that too. Oh, that was the best one ever that I've done. So I feel like that I'm putting that out there today. This is going to be the best one ever until we do the next one.
Well, that's awesome. And as it should be, right? As it should be. Yeah. And so, when we think of the 7 deadly sins and we think about our character flaws, it's truly my belief, Kristin, that left unto our undisciplined mind, most of us will return to our most familiar dysfunctions. So that and I say that because, the 3 components that I think that are imperative as we navigate this thing we call life are awareness, intention, and mindfulness. And, I say to my folks that I work with and I practice in my own life, and you've probably heard me say this, that when we come to a place that we are aware of being aware, then we're there. And what I mean by that we really are consciously aware of who we are, how we operate, the impact that we have on others, and if we're operating in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, that is loving, that's kind, that's respectful. But if we don't come at the world, if you will, with that personal awareness, and then if we don't have that intention, meaning that solidified purpose to operate in a manner that's kind, loving, and respectful, and if we are not completely mindful about it, we will slip back to our character defects. And I say that when we're pressed or stressed, which many people are right now, given the multitude of stressors that are going on, then we slip back to our greatest dysfunctions. And so,
yeah. So can you give me an example of like someone that isn't mired in a personality disorder like narcissism? So just a non-character disordered person's slipping example.
Road rage.
Okay.
Yeah. you get off the effing road, and and it's like, okay.
And that's not how they normally would behave, or maybe they behave that way, but they went, oh, this is not healthy. They stopped, but during COVID and everything you just said that's going on, they've picked it up again. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so, what we want to look at, and we've talked a little bit about this, and then we can dive into what those 7 deadly sins are. But we want to know that, each one of us, we have assets and we have liabilities. We have our strengths, we have our weaknesses, we have our positive sides, and we have our negative sides. And in navigating this thing we call life, we want to be aware of both of them so that we can, with intent and mindfulness, exercise discipline to not operate out of our liabilities. Meaning, one of my character defects is this lovely quality called intellectualization, which means I can just fire into you and cut you off at the knees with a slur of words, right? It's not a beautiful quality. It comes from anger. It's very intimidating. It's very controlling. It's a bit of a form of bullying. And so, being aware that I can do that, then I can exercise the discipline to not engage in that. And so that's the whole thing in moving through this, is not necessarily to give ourselves personality disorders, but to know that we do have the propensity to operate in manners that are not so lovely.
Right.
As well as we can be on the receiving end. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm having all this insight as I'm listening to, and I'll figure out a way where it's appropriate to bring it up. How's that?
You betcha. So if we jump into it, and if we, sometimes that's pretty provoking when people hear the word, the 7 deadly sins. And sometimes that, everybody's going to say, oh, I don't do that. I don't sin. And, when we think of sin, in its definition, obviously it's considered an immoral act, if you will, a transgression against divine law. And practically, though, we want to think about it as any action, any thought, any words that are immoral, selfish, shameful, harmful, but basically that alienate us from a place of operating from love. So as we go through the deadly sins, we want to just keep that in mind. And so when the 7 deadly sins these are not something that I made up. They've been around for a long time. I'll list them and then we can talk about them. Are pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. I love that word, sloth.
Right.
And so, as we think of navigating this thing we call life, and as we think about our character defects, the very first one that we want to look at, and you and I were talking about this before we got into the show, is pride. That sense of one's self-worth as being superior to anybody else, above all, i.e. the narcissist.
Right.
And something that many of us are on the receiving end of, and can be in our own walk, prideful.
Right. Oh yeah. It's something that I'm constantly navigating that, well, not constantly, but I navigate that road too, just like anybody else does. Even if you think you're not navigating that road, I guarantee you are.
Well, and it's that awareness, right? It's considered one of the first deadly sins, because if one is operating from a position of pride, it leads to the other sins falling in place to continue to feed that pride, right?
Right.
That being so full of self. And, and I think that, if we are aware of how to, in its practical sense, I mean, I'm a very spiritual person. And so when people say, wow, your practice, is so strong, or you've been so very helpful for me, pride would be sitting back and going, I am really good. I really got mastered, and you should tell everybody to come to me. And I know that, the way that we actually practice that in a sense is to say, I'm grateful that the Lord has put me in this position and that he guides the work that we do.
Right.
I'm not full of myself. And so we can see it in different ways.
That's true. And also, I want to put this out there because sometimes people like me will hear great things about you from other people, like, oh, Kristin, you're so this, you're so that, whatever, because of the network and all that we do. And I'm in service of it. Is not, I don't take it like, look at what I've done, but I will hear that back from other people. And so having other people tell you how powerful you are, how this or that you are, it's not a sin to say thank you and to feel proud of yourself in that moment. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's not a sin to say, hey, this person told me this, because that's just what they said. The reason why I bring it up, I used to think, oh, it's my ego that says thank you for someone giving me a compliment, a prideful ego. That's utterly ridiculous.
Oh, no. I think and I think that, as codependents, we want to always do, we have difficulty with compliments. And so
Mhm.
being able to say thank you, I really do appreciate that feedback,
Right.
and if we look at, as we walk through the deadly sins, if we look at, that spirit of pride, how do we work with that? It's just by cultivating a spirit of of being humble, right? To be able to say thank you. I appreciate that input. It means a lot to me.
Yep.
It's not being overly full of ourselves. And so if we can practice that balance, I think that we can navigate through that. And, one of the things I know that in parenting, I've never said to my children, and I didn't come up with this, I learned this, is I wouldn't say, I'm so proud of you. I would say, you should be so very proud of yourself.
Yeah.
You've really done a good job here. And that way, you just fuel that intrinsic acceptance versus that egotistical,
Outward. Yeah. 100%.
yeah. And so the next deadly sin that, I think that I'm seeing, more emerged with people in a difficult time is that of greed, the spirit of greed,
Mhm.
desire to possess, more than what you would need for yourself, or trying to gather that material wealth and ignoring your spiritual growth. It's interesting, I think when people are oppressed or stressed, they self-preserve. And where I see that a lot lately is in greed. People are being greedy. But not across the board, and on the flip side of that, if we want to work against it, is the spirit of generosity, of giving.
Right.
We're seeing a bit of a mix of both of those.
Yeah. And I'm seeing, I've really gotten, and I don't, whatever reason I needed to learn this one, but the difference between someone who is frugal and someone who is cheap.
Oh, absolutely.
Cheap has to do with one of the 7 deadly sins, which is greed.
Absolutely. And I think the piece in that differentiates it, Kristin, is the selfish nature behind greed. That it's just selfish. It's self-preserving. It's
Yes.
I'm going to protect myself at a disregard for the impact that it has on you.
Exactly. An example. So let's say you own rental homes and you let them fall apart. You blame the residents for things that are because you have not taken care of this thing that you try to make out to be. Look at what I do for others. Well, there's mold, there's nails sticking out, there's rotted wood, there's over long periods of time, and accuse everybody else, the person that does the work for you, that you barely pay anything, that you accuse of being overcharged and is stolen from you, to it's the people that live there that are awful, and then just not spending the money, being okay with people putting their own money in when they don't even own the place, to upgrading it and accepting that. Just all of that kind of stuff. That's cheap and greed.
It is greed, and we see it all over the place. We're seeing it, unfortunately, with people not being able to pay their rents, right? And being dropped out on the street. And so if we think of, how do we counter that spirit of greed, or that sin of greed? And it's one with generosity. I mean, I challenge people to be generous, and, to think of others, and to look at what you can give and how you can be there. Meaning, I know that when we headed into this COVID, house cleaners left and right. I have a house cleaner that comes every 2 weeks, and that was dropped across the board. And I told her, I said, for as long as I am able, I'm going to continue to gift this as if you were cleaning. I want to be generous.
Yeah, I've
give
done that too. So many people. I've given people podcasts because they need it for their own mental health, to be able to do it for no money. I mean, I've given people money. I mean, I have absolutely done that as well. Absolutely.
Well, it's the service, right? I'm here to serve you. I'm here to give to you. If we don't have money to give, we don't need to give money, but it's, how can I be here for you? How can I support you through this difficult time? How can I be loving, kind, compassionate?
Exactly. I look at it like this. I've helped many, many people. And of course they could have done this themselves, but they wouldn't have if I hadn't. Maybe they would have, but they didn't until I came along and helped them get an SBA loan, for what's going on with COVID.
Absolutely.
I have helped so many people, and it's so funny because all the dozens of people that I have, Frank King is one of them, my friend, well, I don't need to say everybody's names, but they have taken that money and they have continued to be of service to others, which is something they already do. You know how Frank King is. He'll give you the shirt off his back again and again. And then I did it for somebody else, and they are hoarding the money, continuing to not do what they should do with it, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. Okay. That's interesting.
You can see the different character defects.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Yeah. And I think that as we go through these, if we think of these sins as character defects, I think that is an easier way for me to palate them. If we look at, okay, this is a potential character defect, how can I counter it? How can I be aware of that? And how can I invest in giving that which I want, that's consistent with my truth, rather than falling, into that? Because, the other thing that I see, and people, try to stay with, people are always kind of blush with this term, but I think that when people are pressed or stressed, they also can fall into a spirit of lust. And we are seeing that spirit of lust, or that character defect of lust. But where we're seeing it is in this lust after power, authority, food, money, attention. And again, I'm probably referring to the political, positioning and the rioting that we're seeing, across the countries. But that spirit of lust, that I'm going to take more than what is needed, and it's just for me. And so, how can we counter, that pursuit of power and authority, that pursuit, to have things that are not ours? And it's self-control, right? How can I establish boundaries with myself? But if I'm also on the receiving end of other people wanting to exert power over me, I think all of us find that now, it's not safe to talk any kind of politics, because people are going to, try to assert their power and authority over your political position. How do I deal with that, right? How do you exercise boundaries so that you don't get into that, dynamic, that tug of war?
I just walk away. I mean, I've had so many instances, and I just go, I don't believe what you believe. I actually speak to the experts that are in this, and I'm dipping out of this conversation. I've done that quite a number of times. And I've had people that really, it's interesting to hear you talk about this lust. Yes. It's very different from, you are going to your refrigerator to overeat because that's a coping mechanism, that it's not healthy, that you run to because we're all stressed. I think what you're saying is that is not the same thing as what you're talking about in terms of lust.
Well, lust is very selfish, right? It's just we can talk about, and we will talk about, gluttony. So that is another one of the deadly sins. Yeah. And gluttony, is the overindulgence. We think of it as an overindulgence, and most often we think about that as food or alcohol. But what you're talking about is it's that misplaced desire for something of pleasure.
So let me just say this. So someone coming to you and saying, I don't care if you're injured, I don't care if you're whatever, you are not behaving the way that I want you to behave. And so I am going to now be horrible and send you messages or whatever saying, if you don't respond to me by 4:00, then I'm going to do this, this, and that. Like, that's lust. That's trying to have power over another person. Does that make sense?
It does. And so if you think about it in that regard, the spirit of lust is anything that's gratifying to self, right? It's that I'm doing it because it's gratifying for me. So if I'm going to exercise power over you, it's because it gratifies me. Whereas when we look at gluttony is really an attempt to fill a void. It's an attempt to find peace. It's where the addictions come in. It's where, food, eating disorders, alcohol, substance, opiates, and social media, right? So gluttony is really coming from a desire to fill a void, a pain, to numb and distract. Whereas lust really it's purely for my gratification of flesh, if you will, gratification of me. So very, very, very selfish. And that's why when we look at, the deadly sins or these character defects, pride is, when pride is on board, you fall into these others immediately, because you are thinking of just yourself. And we know, pride being, very much associated with narcissism. Narcissism is based on a real or imagined fear of abandonment and rejection. And so that gluttony that you can see, that me. No, I'm going to collect all of these things for me. And gluttony isn't just that you're eating, 2 burritos, gluttony, maybe that you hoard, right? You hoard in that greedy sense, so there's lots of overlap.
Yeah, I've overshopped sinning, gluttony for sure. It has been me. I can't say the other ones are there. I haven't tried to exert, power over other people, or what. I've tried to help people, but that's different than exerting power. And then went, okay, not going to go there anymore because this isn't helping, and I'm becoming drained to where I have no blood left. But the gluttony thing, yeah, overeating and over shopping for sure, 100% me. I'm owning that.
Well, and it's interesting because I don't know at the most recent times or the most recent estimates, but last I looked, liquor sales across America were up 300%.
Yes, 300. Listen to that number, listeners, 300%. And women over 45 have been going to and trying to get into rehabilitation centers for eating disorders, up 75%.
Up 75%. And so if we look at that, that's trying to fill that void, and find that peace in this time of uncertainty. I've told my clients numerous times, I say, be careful. And I was saying this out of the gate. Now we're 6 months into it. I said, be careful of the habits that you are establishing during this time of uncertainty and unrest, because, 6 months, a year into this, those habits that you have developed very likely will be bona fide addictions that will be difficult to get away from.
Yes.
And so, we've talked about this on previous podcasts, that people have gained weight and are going for rehab, as a result of the pandemic. But it's very true. People have numbed and distracted with food and alcohol at a level that I've never seen before in practice. Yeah. And so we want to be aware of that potential character defect in ourselves, and, with intent and mindfulness, to be aware of it so that we can exercise self-control. I mean, I joke with people that one of my vices is chunky peanut butter. And so for years I didn't buy chunky peanut butter because crunchy peanut butter, because I lust after
control myself.
And I'm gluttonous with it. Yeah. And it was funny, the other day I was in my pantry and I had to bust out laughing at myself, because not only had I gone from not buying peanut butter, but I'm here to tell you, I got the mother load. I had the biggest jar of peanut butter that's possible to purchase at the grocery store. And I laughed. I thought, well, I think I have fallen into my character.
Like the Costco version that's supposed to be for an entire middle school is in your pantry. Yes.
And near empty, I'll tell you, and near empty. So when we see these things in ourselves, then we go, okay, it's time to exercise some self-control. For me, that thing went out into the dumpster because it calls me from all over the house.
Oh God, same here.
But can I look at that instead of beat myself up and shame and condemn, to be able to say, wow, I really have fallen into this pattern again, this defect, and I need to exercise some self-control so that, it doesn't continue to become an idol in my life, the peanut butter.
Yes. I'll tell you, I have become, since March, I was already dealing with COVID long before. We just didn't know that it was COVID. And one of my friends died before March, and my ex-husband was very, very ill, sicker he's ever been in his life in December. Well, he had it. So I was dealing with it before we knew what the heck it was. But I have noticed that since March, I've been, obviously stressed and falling on old behaviors that I don't like and whatever. But I have been pretty good about going, kind of giggling about like being how I would be to a friend that's, a really good friend of mine that's struggling, but I'm that friend of mine.
Oh, good.
Like, okay, well, yeah, eating the entire thing of shortbread cookies was probably not your best moment, but hey, at least you went at it with gusto, like having a sense of humor about it, because, and then trying to walk or do whatever to sort of combat this.
Oh yeah, I bust out laughing when I looked at and I kid you not, it's the size of a basketball, this container of peanut butter. So yeah, so if we can have compassion toward ourselves, I think is what I'm hearing you say. It's huge.
Yeah, and I also have noticed an uptick in me putting up boundaries like right away with people that are absolutely just behaving deplorably, and there's an uptick in deplorable behavior towards others, and so I am proud of myself, no matter how much of a you know what somebody might think I am. I am proud of myself that I've been like, no, no, no.
Well, and I think what you're talking about is another another character defect or deadly sin, and that's anger, and not normal anger. I mean, we know that
Right.
Paul says, "Be angry, but do not sin." So be angry, but do not be destructive. But what I'm hearing you say, and what I absolutely am observing in many different places, is hatred.
Oh,
True hatred, and people vengeful and revengeful.
yes.
Bitterness, resentment. I mean, really powerful, destructive forms of anger that I don't see anything productive coming from them. And so
Yeah.
what do we do when we're on the receiving end of those? You walk away, which is, again, a geographical boundary of space and time.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I absolutely, I've just so many things, weird things like getting a rash all over. I've never in my life all over my body, finding out where it came from. And then instead of just walking away going, maybe this needs to stop. Well, it's not bothering anybody else. Okay. But I'm telling you that this is not okay to be feeding people, even if it only affects one person, just stuff like that, where I've said, I don't care what excuses you make in your life for how you choose to ignore things. This is not okay. And then, letting it go, because you can't force someone to be responsible.
At all.
Yeah.
And when we're on the receiving end, of people being irresponsible, or if we're on the
Mhm.
receiving end of people being angry, or, I mean, I find it a lot that I'm interacting with people and their bitterness and their resentment
Yes.
and their revenge and their anger at, again, the political movements, the situations. I mean, I had one person, I was talking about the fires in California because we were getting the smoke, and I was, talking to this person compassionately, and that person said, well, they deserve the fires for all of the rioting they've done out. And so what do we do with that, when we get a comment like that? Because there's nothing to be gained by engaging or defending or explaining.
Hi, this is Dr. Paul Meier of the Meier Clinics. Our Christian counselors across the country have a goal of helping all those who come to us to become what God has called them to be. If you're in a situation where you're not at peace within yourself, or you just feel like there's joy that's missing in your life, we can come alongside to help you obtain peace and joy.
This message is sponsored by the Meier Clinic Foundation, a nonprofit Christian counseling ministry. The number is 1-888-7-CLINIC, 1-888-7-CLINIC.
And that person said, well, they deserve the fires for all of the rioting they've done out. And so what do we do with that, when we get a comment like that? Because there's nothing to be gained by engaging or defending or explaining. Yeah. And so what I say and what I teach and what we know is to exercise patience. Mm-hmm. Follow me? So when we're on the receiving end of that destructive anger or that really psychotic anger, I mean, as long as it's not real true psychosis, it's just to exercise patience, that we can allow them to be in that awkward space and time. And it's not our responsibility to convince them that they're thinking wrong or that their anger is, at a hateful level. There's nothing we can do for it. But if we can exercise patience, then we can certainly not throw fuel to that fire.
Absolutely. And listeners, if you're hearing a weird little squeaky noise, it's because I am dog sitting the sweetest Australian Shepherd ever. He's quite large. And as he's breathing, I've been thinking he's whining, and no, he's just snoring. And if I move him out of the room, then it will be whining. So again, working from home.
Realities, right?
Sorry, I would have a year ago, I would have been like, how unprofessional of me. I should have a sound studio and it should be perfectly egg crated, and all these things. And now I'm like, you know what? Jimmy Fallon doesn't comb his hair and is doing shows on Zoom. So for the Tonight Show, I'm gonna just be okay with hearing the dog snore. And you guys, I'm sorry, have to be okay with it too.
Well, it makes me think of the next character default is that spirit of envy, that many people are envious of your ability to work at home while dog sitting. Follow me?
Yes.
And not having to have a mask all day and be at the grocery store. And so,
right.
Yeah. And so, when people find themselves envious,
Oh. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry. Light bulb moment. Go ahead.
No worries. It's just that how can we exercise that kindness to be able to say, welcome, we love the dog voices.
Yeah. I mean, I've had things where I've spent money that I technically shouldn't have had to. It should have been taken care of by somebody else, but whatever I did to make my life the way I need it to be. And then as things are maybe seemingly easier for me, trust me, they're not. If I don't have a problem in the area that you may be envious about, trust me, I got them in plenty. There's nothing to be envious, but setting things up for myself because I care about myself, and then having people, one person, maybe a couple of others go, well, you've got it made. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Really?
Yeah. It's all in the perception, right? Right.
Exactly. I am not going to feel bad about taking care of myself, especially when, technically that should have been something taken care of by somebody else, but whatever, I will do whatever it takes to take care of myself.
But when we are on the receiving end of that envy, because I know I haven't missed a day of work, since this whole pandemic. In fact, I've never worked harder.
Astounding.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the mental health field, right?
Yeah, so, of course. Yep.
And I have people left and right who have lost their jobs, literally been laid off. And unfortunately, some of them falling into resentment and bitterness and saying, well, you have nothing to worry about. You've worked, you're working harder than normal. And, so when we're on the receiving end of envy, again, I just challenge people to be kind, right. To not, react with that, with, anger or defending or explaining, but really to be kind and to be able to say, I can't even imagine how scary it is not knowing how you're going to pay money.
You're so good at that, Lisa. Like you're such an example for me of that, when I've been rightly so upset about something or whatever something may be, and you'll say, okay, not a problem. Thank you for letting me know. Like you immediately diffuse.
Well, and I think, Kristin, that is my whole goal of wanting to do this podcast, is that those things are done with intention and mindfulness, but secondary to being aware of my character defects, that I could jump right in and say, bad word, and be angry and be spiteful and resentful and bitter. Right. I know that I've got that capacity within myself, but that when we know these character defects, when we know that these deadly sins are out there, it's with that we are, one, aware of them, and that two, with intention, i.e. purpose, and with mindfulness, meaning putting our emotional resources there, we purposefully operate differently. Meaning when someone attacks me, and again, I'm not perfect, but I would say generally speaking, when someone is attacking to me, I will pause, because if I don't pause, I'm going to react in a character defect way. And if I pause and think, how can I be kind? How can I be patient? How can I be respectful? Now, that being said, the closer the proximity the person is to us, i.e. our family members, strangely enough, the more difficult it is for us to do this, right? The closer people are to us, the more likely they're to see our character defects. And we all know that to be true, that our family sees the ugliest sides of ourselves. So
100%.
Yeah, we bite their heads off for leaving their shoes in the front foyer, right? It's like, okay, that really wasn't a big deal, and you can sweep up the dirt.
It's been such a process to move back in with my ex-husband in the midst of COVID. Have not lived together in, I don't know, 10 years or something. I don't know, some ungodly amount of time. And to watch slipping into old patterns of behavior that were reasons why we ended up not being together. See myself, I'm owning my stuff, he has his own, but see myself doing it, realizing that wasn't healthy then and it's not healthy now. and saying, I am really sorry, I will stop doing that, and I love you, and we're gonna get through. That's been a revisiting of my work in the past and revisiting it now and going, okay, good. Because even in the time of COVID, I can be better and do better in some things, not all.
Well, I say we're never too old. It's never too late, that with intent and mindfulness, we can change our behavior. We just have to have the desire to do so, right? And if we don't desire it, nothing's going to change.
Yeah. You're right. I noticed something that happened with someone that I don't particularly like, is not a friend of mine, has done kind of awful things to people. However, they are disabled and they were complaining about something where their generator was moved while they were in the hospital having surgery, and their generator was moved without their permission, and because somebody else just thought it was unsightly. And so the reason why they had it where it was located was because they can't walk far to plug it in or do what they need to do in order to use it when there are storms.
Yikes.
And I'm like, wow, and this is allowed? That's what you mean by the ugliest behavior and making excuses for that ugly behavior and allowing that ugly behavior, and then going back and kissing somebody's rear end because you've sinned on them. Just that toxic soup that goes around and around and around. That's just an example of what happens when you're just running from ill misbehavior to more misbehavior. You're just going, the snake eating its own tail there.
Well, and I think in times like now where we are pressed and stressed, I think that, many people, what I observe, many people, even myself, we move into self-preservation. And when we move into self-preservation, we are not the best version of ourselves.
Right.
And we fall prey to these character defects and to doing things and saying things in a way that is destructive. And, so yes, we're going to be on the receiving end of it. And yes, we're going to be tempted ourselves. And so, as we look through these character defects, one, am I on top of my game with not operating out of those, sins and those defects? And two, how am I responding to them when I'm on the receiving end of them? Because the last one that I'm seeing, and I don't, I love the word sloth, right?
Yeah.
Of that laziness, that idleness, that wasted time, and again, when we call it a sin in this discussion, it gives it a judged position. But what I do observe with these chronically elevated levels of cortisol and with this uncertainty is that, you and I talked about this before, the fight, flight, or freeze.
Yes.
So it's freeze, but I'm still seeing it that people are idle. They're not investing in their spiritual growth. They're not investing in their personal growth. They're kind of waiting. And so again, we want to be aware of that in ourselves of, am I investing? Am I disciplined with my emotional growth, with my spiritual growth, with my relationships with others? Because during this time of being pressed and stressed, all of these defects are temptations, but it's with intent and mindfulness that we can move through them or not let them become an issue in our life, or not let them become an issue in a relationship if we're on the receiving end of them.
And I think sometimes too, when you are someone that pushes and pushes and pushes and pushes yourself, and that we're in unprecedented times, but that doesn't take away from you being someone that pushes and pushes and pushes and pushes. And you start to go, I can't get out of bed sometimes. And look at how awful I'm just, you have to, I say this from a fellow over push yourself person. You have to, you have to take inventory. You have to go, okay, well, wait a minute. During this time, I've made all of these huge changes in my life, and I've done this and I've done this and I've done this and I've done this. So it is not true what I am trying to shame myself with, that I am being a sloth. That's utterly ridiculous. While also noticing that sloth can be in different things. It doesn't have to be an all-over statement. It could be, well, in this particular area, I am being a sloth and I need to work on that.
Absolutely. Well, it can be just avoidance. It can be procrastination.
Yes.
It can be that I don't do anything. I just sit on my phone all day and look at social media.
And watch TikTok and send people TikTok videos. Really?
Exactly.
Really?
Exactly. Yeah.
Go be of service somewhere to someone. Get off of whatever. Yeah.
Well, and I think where we come to in all of this, Kristin, though, is that, each and every day we have a choice between positive and negative, light or dark.
Yes.
Our emotions and the spirits that run our life, meaning our emotions, they're our choice. And so if we are aware of these character defects or these temptations of these kinds of behavior, we can choose which one we want. We can choose what destination we want. And is it consistent with my values or inconsistent with my values? But yeah, and we can choose to call ourselves a sloth when in fact we're just giving ourselves A break.
Day of rest. Yeah.
Yeah,
I just had a new podcaster on the network, Nicole Christina. She's amazing. She does a show called Zestful Aging. And she just said the other day on the show, this is why I love doing what I do, because I learned so much, so many things, because I can beat myself up. Worst enemy, absolutely not. I'm 20% there and 80% not there. And believe me, I used to be 100% there. It has taken work to not live in that. But it was so great to hear her say that all of her patients, she's a social worker, all of them have come at some point and said, one day I'm cleaning my closet, I'm organizing this, I'm doing that. And the next day I can't get out of bed. I almost started crying. Oh my God, that's what's been happening for me.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's okay, because you do eventually get out of bed. And even if you don't, that's something to call Lisa, because she needs more patience.
Work between 12 and 2 a.m., right? Well, but I think, Kristin, that comes back to the awareness, right? That the awareness that I do need a day of rest, the awareness that we are imperfect, but can we allow our imperfections to not be destructive to other people, right? And so, can we embrace, living in a manner that is healthful? And if that means taking a break or changing your schemas, I'm not a lazy sloth to stay in bed on a Saturday morning. It's well-needed rest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Crazy times. So I think that, again, in wanting to do this presentation, it's that we are in unprecedented times. We are very pressed and stressed. We are at a time of adaptation. We're no longer grinning and bearing it. And, when we headed into this, I thought, okay, 2 weeks and we'll be back to normal. And, some of my expert friends are saying, 2 to 3 years.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, really to be mindful of, of my strengths, of my weaknesses, and with intent to try to function out of our strengths. And then what I say is, when in doubt, my real way I say that is, when in doubt, zip it up. But the politically correct way to say that is, when in doubt, wait. So with my reactions, or with our emotions, or with our character defects, if we can give ourselves that pause to look at, is this kind, is this loving, is this respectful, is this consistent with how I want to operate in relationships? And if not, zip it up, wait.
Yeah. I have a choice that I could make easily to just blast the obvious of unprofessional, unsafe, illegal behavior. I absolutely could put that on blast. I have a big platform, and I am 100% saying wait, and probably not.
Awesome.
And I don't put myself up on some pedestal for that. I'm talking, I mean that in the way of, whoo, boy.
Mm-hmm. What impact? You're thinking of the impact, it sounds like. What impact will this have?
Right. What impact will it have? Do I want that kind of energy, even though it's true, even though it's right in so many ways? I'm going to wait and see what behaviors come out, how behaviors going to happen over time. Because what I want, it's how I look at my family, my relationship with my mother, which we've talked about many times, is I want peace.
Yes.
That's what I want. So yes, these irritating things and unhealthy, whatever, but I want peace. So that's what I'm going for. It doesn't mean that these things come up and they're not right and they're on this list that we just talked about, but I want peace. I don't have to be this warrior all the time. I can still be a warrior, but be very peaceful about it.
Well, absolutely. And that's that patience. And, I think that, to wind it down on a positive note of not running to run from our fears, but being more mindful, is that, how can I practice during these times of being humble, being humble with our works, and being generous, with our time and with our compassion and with our goods, if we're able to. How can I exercise self-control, with regard to things that I lust over, that I'm gluttonous with? How can I, as you're saying right there, practice patience? That when in doubt, wait. How can I be kind? And then how can I have self-discipline? I mean, all of those qualities, they're beautiful qualities. And so if we focus on our assets, if we focus on, being disciplined, being kind, being patient, being generous, exercising self-control, then we're more likely to navigate these times and adapt to them in a way that's going to be far more comfortable than, operating out of our character defects.
Exactly. And sometimes the kindest thing that you can do for yourself and for someone else, especially when you do know how powerful you are, is to walk away.
The most basic boundary, geographical space and time.
and pull your energy out of a situation, stop being around someone, cut off the entry points, all that stuff. Sometimes that is the kindest thing that you can do for everybody involved. No explanation needed.
I think that's huge, huge personal power.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. This was Navigating the Deadly Sins. Dr. Lisa Day, can you just list them out really quickly so we've got them burned into our brain?
Oh, you betcha. The deadly sins that we want to be aware of and how we want to counter them. The first one is pride, and we want to nip that one in the bud because pride sets the precedence for, all the other ones of taking over. So with pride, we want to practice humility. With greed, we want to practice generosity. Lust, we want to practice self-control. Anger, we want to practice a sense of patience. Gluttony, again, self-control. Envy, we want to practice kindness. Slothfulness, we want to practice discipline.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. That's the lovely and amazing Dr. Lisa Day of Meier Clinics. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Day.
Thank you, Kristin.
Thank you, listeners. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meier Clinics, please visit our website at meierclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.